So Representative Kresha, House File 400, I know that you have a DE amendment that you are looking at on here as well to get the bill in the shape that you are looking at. Representative Kresha, I move House File 400 before the committee to be re-referred to the Committee on State Government Finance. And Representative Kresha, 2-year bill into the amendment. Welcome, Representative Kresha.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members of the GovOps Committee. Yeah, so would you like to take the DE up right away and then go ahead and pass that, and then we can go to the bill?
Questions to the DE amendment? All right, Representative Kresha, first of all, I will move the DE amendment before the committee. Representative Halverson to the DE1 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since it is a DE, I think I didn't hear any brief description, but that would be helpful. Thank you.
Representative Kresha, if you want to describe the DE, please.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, I'd like to turn to nonpartisan House research, Mr. Gehring, and he can do a much better job of at least making sure the technicalities are correct.
Mr. Gehring to the DE1 amendment before the committee.
Madam Chair, Representative Halverson and Representative Kresha, the DE amendment sort of reformats the underlying House File 400. So the underlying bill as introduced requires vendors that engage in contracting with a state agency or legislative branch to certify that as part of their contract they don't engage in a boycott of Israel as part of their business practices. And there's a definition of boycott of Israel which includes compliance with calls for boycott of Israel other than certain boycotts that are provided in federal law, and then also actions that are taken in a manner that in any way discriminates on the basis of nationality or national origin. So that's the underlying House File 400. The difference between House File 400 and the DE1 is that the DE1 sort of reformats the language to be an anti-discrimination statute as opposed to a anti-boycott statute. So it prohibits a state agency, including MNSCU as well as legislative branch entities, from entering a contract if a vendor engages in discrimination against Israel. And then there's some language in there that requires certification as part of the terms of the contract that the vendor doesn't engage in those activities.
Representative Halverson. Other discussion on the DE1 amendment. Representative Nelson.
So, Mr. Chair and Representative Kresha, what's the difference between a boycott and discrimination? Couldn't I say I'm not going to do business with Israel but not discriminate against them, or are they the same thing?
Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative Nelson. Essentially, they're the same thing. The boycott is usually done in economic terms, but what we did here with the DE is we're actually just trying to work with all the groups. I mean, at the very core of what this bill is, members, is we're saying that this has been done federally, this is done in a number of states, and the basic concept is we're not going to discriminate against Jewish people and their businesses. We would like to do business with them in the state of Minnesota. We would like to do businesses, and there's a movement out there to boycott, divest, and put sanctions against Jewish businesses as a practice for the state of Minnesota. I'm saying in this bill, I don't think that's acceptable. I think that as we do businesses across with Israel, we should look at the Jewish people as an economic partner and just simply say we're going to do business with you and set aside all of the other issues. So I guess to your point, the boycott word was considered a little bit strong, and so we backed down to the discrimination and just tried to make it a little bit more clear as to what the intent of the legislation will be.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess that's understandable, I think. But the other question I have here is with the amendment being put on, all the things you said are about why you want to do this are probably good ideals to have, but with the exception we put on here, I could drive a truck through this bill, and basically it makes it not worth the paper that's written on, because the commissioner may waive this application of this section if he determines that it's not practicable for the state to do it. And I could come up with probably 100, and depending on which way I'll do this, of 100 reasons why it's not practical for the state. And so we're passing a bill here that basically is just more of a feel-good type of bill than actually having an effect on what's going to happen with it. So I guess I'll listen for other questions and go from there.
Other discussion on the DE1 amendment to get the bill in the shape and form that the author wishes. Seeing none, all those in favor of the DE1 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Representative Creasha, the bill is now in the format that you would like. Did you have some opening comments before we begin with public
I do.
testimony?
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. So I'm not going to get into the actual technicalities of it. You're going to hear lots of testimony. There's lots of viewpoints and perspectives around this. I'm certainly not here to litigate any of the territorial disputes. What I'm here is simply on a personal reason. I was asked to carry this bill, and it actually goes back and touches my family's lives a little bit. 5 years ago, my family and I were lucky enough to take a pilgrimage to Israel, and we really got to know Israel at that point, the Jewish people, and as you can imagine, it was something that basically just touched our family. From there, I was able to springboard into learning more about Israel itself and the history, and when this bill came up, the first thing that happened was, this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do for the way we were treated, the welcoming feeling that we had in hospitality, and frankly, in the Palestinian area as well as in Israel. So for me, this just came to me and said, you know what, we don't need to discriminate. We don't need to set aside anybody economically. And I think with many of the things in our history about how the Jewish people have been treated, to your point, Representative Nelson, this is a feel-good bill. And once in a while, it's okay to vote and feel good about what you do and let your head hit the pillow at the night and say, I did something right. And so I have that in front of you, and I know we have a series of testifiers who I'm sure are going to get much more technical, but that's why I'm carrying this legislation.
Thank you, Representative Creasha. And what we will do is, again, 30 minutes for one side, 30 minutes for the other. And as I look at the clock on the wall here, it is about 10:30, so between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, we will take the first group. Between 10 or 11 o'clock and 11:30, we will take the other side. What I will do is I will start with those who are opposed to the bill first, followed by those who are in favor of the bill. The first testifier I have on my list is Mr. Bill McGrath, if he would come forward. And when you come forward, I'll recognize you, ask you to state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Then following Mr. McGrath will be Mr. Matt Shearer. Mr. Matt Shearer will be next. Is Mr. Shearer here? Very good, sir. All right. Mr. McGrath, welcome. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Bill McGrath. Your committee this morning is being asked to take action against specific Minnesotans because of the stance those Minnesotans are taking towards a foreign nation. I am opposed to House File 400. Similar coercion was tried 100 years ago in Minnesota with bad results. In 1917, most Minnesotans were prepared to fight against Germany. Our state government set up a commission to isolate any citizens who did not share that pro-war attitude against the foreign nation of Germany. Meanwhile, in New Ulm, civic leaders presented a petition to the government. Their statement said that the German-American men of New Ulm were willing to serve in the U.S. military, but they did not want to be sent into combat against their German cousins. The state of Minnesota retaliated by removing the New Ulm mayor from his position as mayor and the New Ulm city attorney from his position as city attorney. During the remainder of 1917, other German Americans in Minnesota were jailed, beaten up, or deprived of their livelihoods. None of this repression saved any American lives on the battlefields of Europe. House File 400 seems to be another attempt to get the state of Minnesota to take action against specific Minnesotan citizens because of their attitude towards a foreign nation, Israel. Thank you for listening.
Mr. McGrath, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Shearer, and then followed by Fana Towns. Fana Towns? Very good. Just want to make sure we're ready to go. Mr. Shearer, welcome to the committee. Identify yourself, who you're with for the record, and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Matt Shearer. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Admin. First, wanted to thank Representative Krisha for doing the delete all amendment. Adding the exception to the bill significantly helps us with single source contracting. But would also like to make a couple comments today that are not with respect to the subject matter. Admin does not have a position in the Arab-Israeli conflict, and we won't unless required by statute. Admin administers state contracting law 16C, as you might be aware, and one of the concerns that we have is that over the years, different interests and ideas have been added into state contracting. There's about a 43-page long solicitation document that businesses have to navigate in order to bid on a state contract, and this represents a significant hurdle for small businesses. So any additions to that make it a little bit more challenging for those businesses. In addition, wanted to point out two other comments. First is that any prohibition on bidding on state contracts necessarily reduces competition, which can potentially increase prices for the state of Minnesota. If you prohibit a business from bidding if they don't meet a certain criterion, there won't be as many responses to state contracts. Well, this particular proposal may not impact a significant number of businesses. Any of them would make a difference. And finally, each time conditions are placed in state statute, I did want to make a point that it increases the risk of bid protest. When a losing bidder believes that a winning bidder might be in violation of state statute, they can require, or they can submit a protest to admin. And when that happens, it actually places the administrative burden on admin to assess the veracity of the winner's claims. So from that perspective, it could potentially have some challenges for us down the road in determining whether or not a business is in violation of state statute. So,
Mr. Chair, thank you for your testimony. Ms. Towns, and then followed by Mr. Greg Hagan. Oh, Mr. Shearer, apparently Representative Halverson has a quick question for you. Again, Representative Halverson, we are looking to try to keep this within the 30 minutes for the time of the people opposed and for.
I understand. I just wanted some explanation.
Representative Halverson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, could you, so in your analysis of some of the problems that this might create for the state, could there be a financial liability for the state as you settle any disputes that you have with potential businesses?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Representative Halverson, I can't really identify or quantify that because unless the situation came about, I wouldn't be able to identify or anticipate how many of these instances might happen. But if a bid protest does take place, there is an administrative burden on admin, which would necessarily probably have a cost. It would be hard to estimate that, being that you wouldn't be able to really anticipate things happening in the future. I hope that helps.
Representative Halverson.
Mr. Chair, it does help. Could lawsuits against the state spring up from this?
Mr. Shearer.
Mr. Chair, Representative Halverson, I'd actually have to check with our staff about what a bid protest looks like a little bit more. My understanding is that they protest to us administratively, and then we need to determine the veracity of that. So I guess potentially if someone disagreed, that might be possible, but I am not sure at this time.
Representative Krisha.
I'm just wondering if I could respond quickly.
Sure.
And I just thought I would add, as I looked at this, and obviously we would be adding the Jewish people to this as well. And my question is, we already have lots of places where we can't discriminate. Let's just make sure that we're clear on this is one more that we're not going to discriminate against. And yes, absolutely, are there lawsuits and so forth? If we're going to be afraid of lawsuits because of discrimination practices, I think we're going to have to look at the whole thing as a whole and not just parse this one out.
Mr. Chair. To that
Representative
point.
Halverson, again, you're cutting into the time of the people who are opposed. I just want you to be aware of that.
I just want to be clear that my concern is not discrimination lawsuits. I think that those are, it's very important to make sure that people have all of their rights intact. My concern is about the state's concern regarding the challenge of the language and potential bid protests that might not come because of discrimination actions. I think that there's some language issues. So.
Thank you, Mr. Shearer. Ms. Towns, if you will identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony. Welcome to the committee, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Santa.
Oh, one second. Ms. Sylvia Schwartz is next. Ms. Schwartz, very good.
I'm Santa Towns, and I'm from St. Paul. I want to bring to the attention of our legislators that you are on the verge of enacting a bill that violates our First Amendment rights of free speech. The use of economic pressure in the form of consumer and commercial boycotts has a long history in this country. Boycott is a historically recognized grassroots form of nonviolent protest. I am a individual who has spent many years engaged in boycott coming from New Orleans. And so we are aware of the Montgomery bus boycott, the Nashville lunch counter boycotts, the Cesar Chavez boycott. All of these were recognized forms of free speech in America. Economic boycotts also helped bring about the collapse of South African apartheid. There's nothing technical about any of this. And so I asked you to consider the real ramifications of this bill, that of limiting, violating the First Amendment right of freedom of speech. Thank you.
Ms. Towns, thank you. Mr. Hagan, then Ms. Schwartz. I got just a tad out of order when I was making the announcement. Mr. Hagan, Mr. Craig Hagan, then Ms. Schwartz. Mr. Hagan, welcome to the committee, sir. State
Thank
your name
you.
for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Greg Hagan, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Just to be clear also, the BDS movement is not in no way an action against the Jewish people. It is a protest against the policies of the Israeli government. As a military veteran, I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And when I left the military, I was not asked to retract that oath. So when I see an attempt by elected officials to subvert the rights we as citizens of the United States are guaranteed by the Constitution, I become very concerned. I'm at a loss to understand why any Minnesota legislator would choose to carry water for a foreign government while attempting to limit the rights of American citizens. Our legislators should be in the business of protecting our rights, not punishing us for exercising them. Whatever your views on Israel and Palestine, these types of bills should be of grave concern because they threaten the rights of everyone in the United States to take collective action to address injustice. Moreover, we should all be alarmed that a foreign government, in this case Israel, is lobbying U.S. politicians to restrict our rights. Politicians are free to denounce BDS if they choose, but they must do so without infringing on the rights of their constituents. Thank you.
Mr. Hagan, thank you so much for your comments. Ms. Schwartz, and then followed by Adria Fernandez, if I pronounced that correctly. Thank you.
And
Ms.
for the-
Schwartz, I'm sorry, Representative Krisha?
For the record, I have not been lobbied by Israel at all.
Duly noted. Ms. Schwartz, welcome to the committee, and thank you for
Hello.
being here with us today. State your name for the
Thank
record.
you. My name is
Okay.
Sylvia Schwartz, and I am a Jewish-American woman and an engineer, and I oppose this bill. I agree with the people before me who talked about the unconstitutionality of the bill and that it restricts free speech. I just want to repeat the words of Antonin Scalia, who said, quote, "The first axiom of the First Amendment is this: as a general rule, the state has no power to ban speech on the basis of its content." I believe the authors of this bill feel that by banning the support of boycotts against Israel, and boycott has been determined to be a form of free speech, that they will be protecting Israel. Again, Antonin Scalia, a fierce proponent of the First Amendment, said, quote, "We should celebrate rather than condemn the addition of this speech to the public debate," unquote. Free speech should never be feared. Given his opinions on all other free speech issues, we can be sure that he would have condemned this bill. Banning speech with which the state legislators disagree cannot protect another country. This bill will only serve to punish businesses and churches who have taken a principled stance on Palestinian rights. Those businesses and nonprofits must then either lie about their positions or forego receipt of government benefits. Forcing a business owner or a faith-based nonprofit into this untenable situation will have serious implications to business climate and the free speech of all citizens of Minnesota. No one in this chamber or in the state legislature should be in favor of this unconstitutional bill.
Ms. Schwartz, thank you for your testimony this morning. Ms. Fernandez, followed by Mr. Barry Cohen. Mr. Barry Cohen, very good, sir. Ms. Fernandez, welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Adria Fernandez. I would like to speak against this bill as a Jewish Minnesotan. I have worked with Jewish Voice for Peace, but my statements should be considered my own opinions. I believe House File 400 is a fundamentally misguided and anti-democratic bill. When California considered a similar law, so many legal red flags were raised that they were not able to pass the bill until the language had been watered down so much that it doesn't prohibit state contractors from boycotting Israel at all, making it a politically chilling but ultimately pointless reiteration of that state's existing anti-discrimination law. I also believe this bill represents several very disturbing political trends. The first is the broad demonization of Muslims. Israel's actions in the occupied territories are widely condemned, but this bill effectively declares advocacy for Palestinian rights to be politically out of bounds in Minnesota. Second, I think this bill should be seen in the context of a broader push to silence and criminalize activists, particularly activists of color, along with HF400 that would allow government to sue citizens for participating in protests. This represents an attempt to portray dissent as dangerous, to push people out of the range of respectability and humane consideration if they stand up for themselves. Third, I think this reflects a larger attempt to paint criticism of the actions of the state of Israel as anti-Semitic. In fact, the Jewish community has a long, proud tradition of dispute and dissent, and Jews of good conscience disagree on Israel and its policies. This bill should not be thought of as protecting Israel and the Jewish people, but as an attempt to privilege the opinions of one segment of Jewish and Israeli society over all others. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fernandez, for your comments. Mr. Cohen, and then Ms. Danielle Cotton. Ms. Cotton. Very good. Mr. Cohen, welcome to the committee this morning, sir. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Dr. Barry Cohen. I'm a retired sociologist. I am a Jewish citizen of St. Paul, a member of Congregation Oramet for 25 years. I don't discriminate against Jewish people. I'd like to call to your attention that not only are we dealing here with a free speech issue, but think of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So barring vendors who boycott Israel may be also unconstitutional under the clause. You would be creating a class that by law will be different than others as a result of their as a result of this law. They might suffer financial loss. Imagine I could boycott Finland, I could boycott Fiji, I could boycott any other country in the world, but I can't boycott Israel. You are creating a class that's separate again, that could be harmed by what you propose, and this could lead to lawsuits against the state for that kind of discrimination. The other thing I'd like to bring up, and Sylvia mentioned churches and faith organizations, many of them contract with the state to provide human services. Let me read you the list of faith organizations that have already agreed, have already passed resolutions to boycott or divest in Israel. The Presbyterian Church, Unitarian Universalist Association, United Church of Christ, United Methodist Church, the Quakers, Mennonite Central Committee, Catholic Conference of Major Superiors of Men, Alliance of Baptists, Muslim American Society, and the Islamic Circle of North America. Many of the faith organizations that I've listed here already are providing social services as vendors in many of your communities. You may be prohibiting them from doing business with Minnesota.
Dr. Cohen, thank you so much this morning for being with us. Ms. Cotton, and then followed by Mr. Bill Pentelovich. Ms. Cotton, welcome to the committee this morning. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Danielle Cotton, and I just want to say that I agree with what has been said. I believe this is a violation of the first constitutional amendment for the freedom of speech. I believe that boycotting has been an action and an exercise that we've been given that has made a huge change in a lot of different discriminatory actions among the history of different minorities and et cetera. And I also want to say that I oppose this bill.
Ms. Cotton, thank you for your time in front of the committee this morning. Mr. Pentelovich, and then followed by Art Surtov, if I've pronounced that correct, sir. Thank you. Mr. Pentelovich, welcome to the committee this morning, sir. If you'll go ahead and state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Bill Pentelovich. I am the chair of the board of the American Civil Liberties Union of Minnesota. Represent 38,000 supporters in the state of Minnesota. The mission of the American Civil Liberties Union is to protect our Constitution. The ACLU takes no position on the BDS movement or on the conflict in Israel. HF400 violates the U.S. Constitution, and there is no way around it. It violates it in two respects. First, under Article 1, Section 3, Clause 8, only Congress has the right to regulate foreign commerce. This bill unabashedly regulates foreign commerce and therefore exceeds the powers of a state legislature because the jurisdiction of Congress to regulate foreign commerce is exclusive and plenary. That's not the civil liberties issue, though. That's just a basic issue of your ability to do this. The constitutional issue is that there is a doctrine called the unconstitutional conditions doctrine, which holds that a government agency, a government body, cannot impose unconstitutional conditions as a condition of contracting with state government. This bill, as currently structured, prohibits boycotts to achieve political ends. Boycotts to achieve political ends are protected expression under the First Amendment. It's well established. It's indisputable. This bill violates the free expression guaranteed by the First Amendment. I know that you have been provided, and there's back of the room, an analysis by a professor at Northwestern University Law School that purports to justify this constitutionally. I suggest you read it carefully. It is a flawed and unsupportable analysis. The Constitution says what it says. The case law says what it says. This bill will not withstand judicial scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this morning, sir. Mr. Surtov, followed by Zayed Amar. Zayed Amar? Very good. Good morning, Mr. Surtov. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Art Surtov. I'm here with Jewish Voice for Peace that is in contact with 2,000 Minnesotans. The comments about free speech, I couldn't agree with more, and I'm not going to say anything else about those. As a Jew, I'm very concerned that this bill advances a dangerous and misleading definition of anti-Semitism, or in the words of the law, discrimination against Jewish people. To me, and many in the Jewish community, anti-Semitism is a powerful label that evokes mobs out of control, ransacked homes, severe beatings, killings, and a people condemned to death because of their religious belief. This bill equates criticism of the Israeli state with anti-Semitism. Nothing can be further from the truth. A significant portion of the Jewish community loves Israel, but strongly opposes its behavior regarding Palestinians, and especially within the occupied territories. We believe that Israeli behavior violates international law and demonstrates crimes against humanity. This behavior is for me represented in the phrase Israeli leaders use to describe their periodic military suppression of Palestinian resistance. They use the term mowing the grass. What is suppression of Palestinian, what is most abhorrent is that the Prime Minister justifies this behavior in my name. For me and many other Jews, Israeli behavior represents the opposite of Jewish values. We see boycott, divestment, and sanction international movement as a peaceful and nonviolent way to pressure the Israel that we love into behaving in accordance with Jewish values. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Sertoff, thank you so much for your testimony this morning. Mr. Amra, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, followed by Mr. Harry Mueller. Mr. Harry Mueller, excellent. Thank you, sir. Welcome to the committee, and state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Ziad Amra. I'm a little background. I was born and raised here in Minnesota to immigrants from Palestine. And my mother was a homemaker, and my father was the chief of surgery at St. Francis Hospital in Shakopee. And before that, he volunteered and was a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy during Vietnam as a medical officer. And so, we have a long history of involvement in civic service to this country and this state. And as a Palestinian American, I want to tell you how disturbed I am by this legislation, because I fail to see how it adds any value to the economy and to the taxpayers and the citizens of this state. Rather, what it does is it protects Israel, a sovereign foreign nation, from any criticism for its criminality, and especially in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem. These are occupied territories. Our own government has supported distinguishing between the Israel itself and the occupied territories of which it illegally occupies. This year, 2017, will be the 50th year of this illegal occupation. UN Security Council resolutions in 1980 and most recently this year, again, call on nations of the world, including the United States, to make a distinction between Israel and the occupied territories. Now, this legislation that you are proposing would do away with that and would encourage businesses and the state supporting, war crimes and in illegal occupation. We own land there. I have land there. I've inherited land there. I'm being forbidden from advocating for that it be returned to me, that it can be expropriated without compensation. Yesterday, Israel passed a law that they can expropriate all private Palestinian land without compensation. And you're saying that I can't say anything about this if I want to do business with the state or provide services to the poor. That's outrageous. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Mr. Mueller, and then I have Keldon Abakal. Very good, sir. Is it Mueller or Miller?
Mueller.
Thank you, sir. If you'll
Ein
state
guter deutscher Name.
if you will state your name for the record.
I'm Harry Mueller. I'm a retired Lutheran clergyman, and I'm here representing myself, but also countless numbers of grandparents and parents of Palestinian kids. In '84, I traveled to South Africa, and I was a part of a discussion and debate in our church body on this same issue as to whether we should disinvest money and put pressure on the apartheid system in South Africa. And 10 years later, with the pressure that was put on, there was a turnover. There had been an expected bloodbath, and there was no bloodbath after that turnover. I want you to hear me. I'm not anti-Jewish. My scripture are the same as Jewish people, but there's a cycle to violence. First there's an injustice, and then there's protest, and then there's a repression of it, and we see that in our own state as well. But when there's a repression and it becomes sanctioned by church body, religious bodies or business bodies or government bodies, it only feeds to the cycle of violence. And the parents and the grandparents of Palestinian kids don't want to see their kids coming with knives because they're so frustrated not being able to get a good education or jobs or anything like that. I used to ask the people in my parishes if they wanted their politics to govern their religion, or if they wanted the best of their religion to govern their political decisions. And I would say to you that if you don't let mercy, humility, justice, inclusivity, and nonviolence guide your decision on this bill, this misguided bill, then you will feed the cycle of violence. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Mr. Mueller, thank you for your testimony today. And following Mr. Abakel will be Jordan Kushner. Jordan Kushner.
Hello, my name is Khaldoun Abu Haikal. I'm a Palestinian American, a small businessman in Minnesota. I came to this country 25 years ago, and actually I was appointed on the board of food safety and the defense task force by the governor, so I'm very well, don't worry guys. My point here, I currently own 2 businesses that employ over 75 employees. And the majority of my business is with the state of Minnesota. And as a Palestinian who moved from that land just for the same issue that we are under occupation, no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, the only deal for you is either violence and get into that circle of violence, or try to make it through education and move. And that's what my parents sent me here, so I could avoid that. Coming here, and this thing is coming to hunt us down here, that, no expression of speech. I don't think it's fair for us, for me in particular, as a Palestinian American who's been under occupation, and my parents and my family still under that occupation, that I have to sign a waiver that I cannot boycott Israel. Although, most likely my business will never have to do business with Israel, but it's just the principle of the First Amendment of freedom of speech. I don't think in principle that I could sign that waiver and do it. Many people might lose their jobs because I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to have to get involved in the legal action against the state because this is unfair and unjust. And I'm going to end with this deal. In the Middle East, there's a joke that they say, the only place that you can open your mouth is the dentist. Don't make this country that way, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Jordan Kushner, followed by Craig Harris. Jordan Kushner. Mr. Harris, if you would like to proceed, it does not look like we have Mr. Kushner or Ms. Kushner here today. I'm not sure if it's Jordan male or Jordan female.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Craig Harris, and I'm adding my voice to the strong opposition against this legislation. I agree with the things that everybody that spoke before has said, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. I'm just going to...
Including me? Kidding.
Yes, sir. Actually, what I wanted to say was I'm happy that you and others are able to go to Israel and have a really good experience, and that feels good. My daughter lives in the Haitian refugee camp in Bethlehem, and she and her family lives under the occupation. I just got back after a month living there, and I can tell you they don't feel good. I think that a feel-good legislation is inappropriate. I think that there's no way that this body should be entertaining something like this as a feel-good legislation. I think that it should be exposed as what it is, which is a well-funded national campaign to demonize people with an opposing point of view as being anti-Semitic and to silence dissent. I reject this wholeheartedly, and I encourage you all as legislators to have the courage to stand up for free speech. If indeed there is other anti-discrimination legislation already on the books, why do we need this? Why is this so important that this body do this legislation at this time? And I just reject that it's necessary, and I just think it's inappropriate, and please don't do this.
Mr. Harris, thank you for your testimony today. That concludes the people that I had on the list for opposed. Given the fact that Representative Halverson had asked a few questions, I want to continue to be fair for the full 30 minutes. Is there someone who, one or two people who may want to spend a few moments addressing the committee that was not on the list that is opposed before we move? Sir, if you come down, we'll give you a chance to testify. And ma'am, you'll be the other one that I'll be able to have time for here today. Again, opposed before we move to those who are in support. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Asa Diebold. I am a Jewish resident of Minnesota, and I oppose this bill. As some people have stated, this bill is legally indefensible. It will not stand up to review. It is largely symbolic, and you should take seriously that symbolism will be used as a tool against people who are seeking justice around the world. There are students at the University of Minnesota who have advocated for their political views, for divesting from companies which profit from the occupation, and they have been victims of slander and harassment, as being accused of being anti-Semitic for simply opposing the illegal actions of another state. And this bill, if it is passed, will be used as a weapon against them to further harass students who are simply standing up for their political views. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. Ma'am, if you want to come down, we'll hear your testimony, and we'll then switch to those who are in support of the bill. And Mr. Andrew Whitman will be our first testifier when we switch from those who are opposed to those who are for. Mr. Whitman. Mr. Whitman. Okay, very good. You're on deck in just a moment. Ma'am, welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Dareen, and I'm from Palestine. I'm studying at Humphrey School of Public Affairs. I'm opposing this bill, and I'm agreeing with everyone that was said. I lived in Palestine. I lived in exile. I was a refugee. And after return, I witnessed two uprising, and I have the fear to go back in June and experience the same thing, harassing at the checkpoint and live under the same circumstances. Allow the people to support and do what you have taught us at American University, freedom of speech, plus justice and equality. That's what I'm learning here, and I hope that will be applied. It's not only words on paper. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. That concludes the time frame and the number of testifiers that we have for those who are opposed. We'll now move to those who are in favor. Before we do that, Representative Krisha.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd just like to, before we
Mr.
move
Whitman,
to,
you can go ahead and get ready if you'd like.
Before we move to those that support the bill, one thing I'd like to say is I'm just a legislator. I'm just a policymaker. You're going to hear, as you've heard from those that are opposed to the bill, with some deeply held convictions and passion. And what we do here is we debate ideas and we debate bills. Just because I'm carrying a piece of legislation certainly does not mean I'm an expert, nor do I have anything as far as the experience of the testifiers up here. So I just wanted to say, I hope that as you take those that are in opposition and also listen to carefully those that are in support, and let us do what we do best, and that is weigh competing ideas and figure out the best policy for the state. My idea on this, and the administration came out and said this, I'm not trying to force the issue. I'm not trying to litigate this in any manner. I'm just trying to keep us out of the Arab and Israel conflict, and say that the state of Minnesota should not engage in this and let the free speech happen. We're not boycotting free speech. We're allowing people to express their viewpoints, but we discriminate. We don't allow for discrimination in other contracts, and that's what this policy would do.
Mr. Whitman, our first testifier on those who are in support of House File 400 as amended this morning. Mr. Whitman, welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, sir.
Thank you for permitting me to testify. I'm Andrew Whitman,
and I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota, but I'm not representing the University of Minnesota in any way. I'm a retired firefighter for the city of Maple Grove, paid on call. I'm not representing the city or the fire department. I'm an attorney, and I've worked in government, and I have some comments about this bill, which start out with, oh, I should also tell you that I've been to Israel 3 times. I've been to Israel with a group of professors who went to Israel to determine and try to find out why they are so innovative, and I can tell you some things about that, and that was in 2015. I would recommend to the drafters of this bill that they read the book, The Startup Nation, and that'll give them some economic background for this particular bill. So I certainly agree that it is the right thing to do, but moreover, it's the economic thing to do for the state of Minnesota. It has nothing to do with the rights of private citizens. It only says to the colleges and universities and entities of the state of Minnesota that they should not discriminate. There are a number of areas where they're not permitted to discriminate already, and that will be added to it. And further, I think that in looking at this bill, I think it could be simplified so that the Department of Administration doesn't have so much concern. And one way of doing that would be on the first paragraph to simply say that a contract for goods or services must not engage in a boycott of Israel, and take the certification out of it so the Department of Administration doesn't have to be involved in certification. So I'm very much in favor of this bill for those reasons. Thank you.
Mr. Whitman, thank you for your testimony this morning. Our next testifier is Steve Henges. If I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry, sir, if I'm missing your name there. You will proceed with your testimony, and then we are going to be followed by Sami Rahman. Welcome to the committee. If you'll state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Good morning, members of the committee, Chairman, Representative Driscoll, Representative Krisha. My name is Steve Hennigs, and I'm the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, and I thank you and I thank everyone who's participated in this discussion for the way it's been conducted with civility and rationality, and that's certainly a hallmark of our legislative process as well as our country. And thank you, Representative Krisha, for your comments and your support. It's deeply appreciated. I want to start here with an issue that people may not see as necessarily germane, but perhaps a unifying moment during this discussion. I was proud last year to sign this full-page ad in the Star Tribune with many other people from the state saying that discrimination against Muslims has no place in Minnesota. And I was very proud to participate in that ad with many of the leaders of our state. I'm also very proud to report that in the aftermath of the terrorist threat phone to the Sabus, Minneapolis Jewish Community Center, this community reached out to the Sabus Jewish Community Center as well as the entire Jewish community. 227 faith leaders signed a letter to the community and to the Jewish Community Center expressing solidarity, expressing support. They were Christian, they were Buddhist, they were Muslim, they were from all walks of life, and I'm very proud of that. And this is one place where Minnesotans are very united against discrimination and against threats made against our institutions. People have been speaking in certain names. I want to speak with the American people. Gallup has been polling on these numbers for many years. Exactly 1 year ago, polled on Israel-Palestinian issues and found that 62% of Americans are sympathetic with Israel, 71% Americans have a favorable view of Israel. 16 states have passed some variety of anti-BDS legislation, including Iowa. It's presently under consideration in Wisconsin, South Dakota, and North Dakota. We have significant trade between the United States and Israel, $87 million, in fact. 3M, Medtronic, other Minnesota businesses have significant business loci in Israel. This legislature itself, our legislature, has this supported Israel dating back to May 1919, when the Minnesota House of Representatives made Minnesota the 9th state to pass a resolution favoring the establishment of what was then called the Jewish Commonwealth in Palestine. So almost 100 years at that point. But let's talk about unification and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. I'm here today in front of this committee to reaffirm commitment to a two-state solution. One part of that is repudiating the delegitimization of Israel and not subsidizing bigotry or discrimination. The other side of that is strengthening the Palestinian economy, and I'm proud to say that our organization, the JCRC, has tried very hard to strengthen the Palestinian economy. We've hosted the Palestinian American Chamber of Commerce. We've hosted Basar al-Mashri, a visionary of the planned Palestinian city of Rawabi, when we had banks and people from many walks of life, business, diplomacy, Secretary of State, the Minnesota Trade Office, financial services, all having an opportunity to hear from Basar al-Masri, as well as what he represents for Palestinians. So I see these as two sides of the same coin. We're going to fight delegitimization, and we're going to do our best to strengthen the Palestinian economy in order to bring about a two-state solution to the conflict between Palestine and Israel. Just a word on the First Amendment concerns. This bill, this proposed legislation, does nothing to inhibit or impair anybody's ability to speak freely, or businesses. Businesses can speak out all they want against Israel. They can hang a banner from their entryway that says, "Down with Israel," whatever it is they want to say. To paraphrase President Obama with respect to another piece of legislation, all it does is say we're not going to subsidize discrimination against Israelis or Jews. There are others who will speak on behalf of this legislation. I follow in the steps of Representative Krisha when he says, yes, this is the very best purpose of our deliberative bodies, to take these difficult issues and analyze them and come up with the best possible public policy for the state of Minnesota. And I urge you to support House File 400, and I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you. We have two other people who are on the list that have asked to speak in favor of it. If there's anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the bill this morning, please identify yourself so we can get you on the list. And in keeping with the 30 minutes on both sides, I'm going to ask Mr. Raham to go ahead and testify. And then the last person I have is Walid Isa. Very good. And again, if there's anyone else who is pro that would like to, we've got some time left from the pro side for individuals to testify as well. Sir, if you'll state your name for the record and proceed, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair O'Driscoll and members of the committee. My name is Sami Rachamim, and I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Minnesota. I identify as a progressive and as an Israeli American. I am also a strong supporter of the two-state solution, which means an independent Palestine living in peace and security next to the Jewish and democratic state of Israel. I'm here to tell you about my experience as a Jewish student leader at the University of Minnesota. Last spring, campus activists of the global Boycott, Divest, and Sanctions, or BDS movement, brought forward a campaign titled UMN Divest, calling on the university to divest from 4 specific companies doing business with the State of Israel. The goal of this movement is to demonize Israel, delegitimize my family's country's existence, and eventually destroy the world's only Jewish state. As Jewish students who support and love the State of Israel, as imperfect as it may be, we could not stay silent in the face of such a bigoted, one-sided attack. Serving as the vice president of the Jewish Student Center in Minnesota Hillel and the president of Students Supporting Israel, I spearheaded a counter-campaign, which we called UMN United. Jewish and pro-Israel students had to mobilize quickly, but we all knew that we were standing up for our community and our values. It was not the first time that Jewish students were targeted by the BDS movement's anti-Semitic attacks and rhetoric. On November 3rd, 2015, BDS activists organized a protest to shout down and shut down a lecture by distinguished Israeli ethicist Moshe Halbertal at the University of Minnesota Law School. Professor Halvertal was there to talk about moral challenges in asymmetric warfare when a uniformed army is fighting against an ununiformed militia, and how the uniformed professional army carries the utmost responsibility to prevent civilian casualties on the other side, even if it means putting their soldiers in greater danger. But to these anti-Israel activists, that didn't matter. All that mattered to them was that he was an Israeli Jew, and that was enough for them to illegally silence him, delaying the lecture by over 45 minutes. 3 people were arrested. It was chaos. It was, as someone earlier mentioned, a mob. Similarly, it didn't matter that the companies targeted by the BDS campaign at the U, by and large, provide Israel with defense technology, such as the Iron Dome missile defense system. And as terrible as it is that BDS marginalizes the Jewish community on campus and fosters a climate of anti-Semitism, perhaps its most tragic aspect is that it does nothing to bring Israelis and Palestinians closer to a two-state solution, one where each people is afforded a future of security and dignity. In fact, it only drives the two sides further apart. On campus, I made numerous attempts to work with BDS leaders to create positive change for Israelis and Palestinians. Sadly, they rejected any offer to negotiate, any offer to compromise, or amend the resolution to call for socially responsible investment in all companies working in all countries. Ultimately, I proposed such an amendment to the Minnesota Student Association Forum, thereby making their BDS resolution about global socially responsible investment, instead of setting a discriminatory double standard against the world's only Jewish state. It came as no surprise that after the forum voted to adopt this amendment, the BDS leaders removed themselves from their authors as authors of their own resolution, thus exposing their true intentions to pursue a one-sided attack against Israel. Thankfully, they did not succeed. The student-led UMN United campaign was a victory for Jewish and pro-Israel students, but we could not have done it without the support of our community partners such as the JCRC and the bipartisan coalition of 80-plus legislators, and including several on this committee, who successfully urged President Kaler to oppose the BDS campaign. Just allow me to note before I close that this bill does not preclude Americans from criticizing Israel. In fact, many of the people who are most critical of Israel and are critical of Israeli policy, as I often do myself, are Jewish. The difference between those of us who are critical of Israel in hopes of it reaching a peace agreement with its neighbors and those who support BDS is that we dream of peace for both peoples, while the BDS movement dreams of the destruction of my family's country. Lastly, companies will, of course, keep their right to boycott Israel. Just they'll have to know that the state of Minnesota, does not support such discriminatory practices. Thank you.
Sir, thank you for your testimony. The last person that we have is Mr. Asa. And again, I will ask if there's anyone who would like to speak for. We do have some time remaining on that side of the equation. Anyone else wishing to speak for? Seeing none, then our last testifier will be Mr. Asa. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the committee. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
My name is Walid Isa. I'm a Palestinian here. Just for the record also, I'm just here to speak my mind, honestly and openly. I'm not trying to take a position, strong position on either side. I just want to express my thoughts to the community because I do care about everybody. As I mentioned, my name is Walid Isa. I was born and raised in the Hesha refugee camp in Bethlehem. And let me just start right from the start, that we need to affirm that the only visible and just solution to the conflict is the two-state solution. We must reject extremism on both sides. As Palestinians, we have learned from conflict after conflict, trauma after trauma, that if you do not have a country that is yours, a country that you own, ultimately you are always at someone else's mercy. This has not been a very kind history to the Palestinian people. All of us are mortal, and our children deserve so much more than empty promises that may never be. If the two-state solution offers me as a Palestinian the best chance at the dignity of self-determination, then how could I not be for it? Now, when it comes to the occupation, let me just be clear. The occupation is illegitimate and must come to an end for there to be a free Palestinian state next to the Israeli state. Adding cost to the occupation is something that I find acceptable. This is why, like many advocates who are for the two-state solution, I had trouble with a bill, with occupied territories, because that's not something I do support. However, I find it completely unacceptable also is to discriminate, boycott, divest from, and sanction all Israelis, no matter where they live or work. It does not fit with the necessity of a two-state solution. It also does not recognize that the Israeli people are very delicate, textured community, including many who are pro-peace and true partners on the ground. If we view all Israelis as one, if we sanction them all as one, if we treat extremists the same way we treat peace-seeking individuals, we risk driving those who want peace into the same camp as those who deny Palestinians and hopes for independent states. As a Palestinian, I do not have the luxury of allowing the BDS movement to undermine the very Israelis that I need to make peace with, to obtain my dream of an independent Palestinian state. I don't see any contradiction between opposing the BDS for the Israelis without the territories and supporting a Palestinian state and the economy in Palestine. Because I grew up in the hard conditions of a refugee camp in the occupied Palestine, when the BDS advocates speak of hardship and human rights violations, none of this is a surprise to me. I have lived it. What, however, is really a surprise to me is that too many of some activists are ignorant at the best and dismissive at worst of the fact that many Palestinians manage to be creative, energetic, and hopeful, despite the obstacle. Many Palestinians are investing in a better future for ourselves and our people. We do my family and other Palestinians a terrible service if we look at them as victims. We help no one when we blindly inflict pain on Israelis, no matter what the collateral damage is to the Palestinians. Yes, Minnesota legislators should vote for the bill File 400 against BDS only inside Israel, but not the occupied territories, because this is where the Palestinians dream to have their Palestinian state. As a state, we must also invest in supporting Jewish and Muslim Minnesota working together to address peace and reconciliation in Palestine and Israel. What actually concerns me the most is the strong opinion and the strong passion in both sides within our state here, and the gap that the divide that keep getting bigger and bigger every single day among our community. It's breaking my heart. It's very sad to see college students who are Arabs and college students who are Jewish are divided, are not working together. What we need to do to focus, to bridge the gap between our community here and not give, 30 minutes to oppose and 30 minutes to support, but to help them get together and understand each other's concerns and hopes better. And that also will help the people on the ground. I just want to end, as a wise man once told me, the Jewish and Arab histories and narratives are precious. They must not become political bargaining chips or the subject of negotiations. Palestinians and Israelis do not need to embrace each other's narrative, nor should they abandon their own narrative. They need, they don't need each other to confirm their own identities. What they need is a workable way forward to allow them to live side by side in peace. Hearts as well as minds must change to make this possible. Let this holy work be continued here today. And just to the end, I think if we wanted to support the Palestinians and the Israelis, we must support our communities here, whether the Jewish community and the Arab community, to build bridges and get to know each other and work together. My dream is to have them as Minnesotans, not as Jewish Minnesotans and Arab Minnesotans. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Krisha, before we go to member questions, any thoughts that you want to share at this point?
I do, and thank you to all the testifiers. As I think through this, as you can tell, it's a very complicated issue. It's a human issue. At the end of the day, it's people struggling to find paths forward. It's people struggling to get along. It's people trying to find out what the future is going to hold for them. And I'm certainly no way an expert in any of this. And I've listened to as much as I can on both sides. I am very fortunate. I feel like I have learned a tremendous amount and listening to both sides. But what this is coming down to me is, from a policy standpoint, a legislator, that we should not, in the words of President Obama, subsidize discrimination, or taking the stance of Secretary Clinton that anti-Semitism is on the rise in Europe and around the world, and we should not support that. And I think to the testifiers that you just heard, when we reject extremism on both sides, perhaps we can allow for more conversations. So I realize there's still going to be lots of emotion on this, and there's still going to be lots of questions. What I would respectfully ask of the committee is that, as a bill author, that we take this vote on a voice vote and not a roll call. Allow me to move it forward and continue to have the conversations. And as with all debate and conversations, the best thing we can do is just keep moving forward and keep people talking. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Representative Krisha, our first and only question that I have on the list right now is from Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Krisha, I'm happy you changed the language from boycott to discrimination. I think that does change the bill and gives us an opportunity to talk about discrimination. It's heartening to hear you say that the state should not do business with any business that has discriminatory practices. Hopefully that spirit's reflected not just in how we deal with contracts in other countries, but also within our own state. I would hope you would join me in opposing any bill that allows a business to discriminate against any customer that walks in their doors, regardless of their race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or sexual orientation. So I look forward in working with you on all types of discrimination. Thank you.
Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was fortunate to visit Israel a number of years ago. We also went into the West Bank and Bethlehem. And that was probably, the Christmas after that was probably one of the hardest ever, knowing what the situation is in Bethlehem. However, we also got to meet with the Israeli Foreign Ministry, with the Palestinian leaders and others that are trying to bring peace to the area. And what I came away with this, we're talking a very small area where people are, their lives are endangered daily. But I still see this piece of legislation as doing more to incite confrontation than truly trying to let the peace process proceed. I'm really troubled by this.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members, and Representative Krisha. As I've been hearing the testimony on this, we talked about creating a list of companies that are participating in this boycott or discriminating. Do we have a list yet of those companies? And I know I've heard different states have passed this, and I've heard different states have different lists. How are we supposed to determine who these companies are? And are any of these companies currently doing business with the state of Minnesota?
Representative Krisha.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the questions. Those, I'm sure, will have to be reviewed and recommended by the Department of Administration.
Representative Nelson.
So, Mr. Chair, what I hear there is that we don't have a list currently. And again, that goes back to my earlier comment that we're passing legislation, we're moving this forward, and with the amendment and the exception put in the amendment, it's, you know, I think Representative Krisha and I have a different, when I called it a feel-good, it makes us feel good to pass this. I mean, you know, it's good that we can pass stuff that we feel good about, but this is, I'm just saying it's a feel-good legislation to make us feel good like we actually have done something, but with the exception that's put on here, I don't see this doing anything. Again, the exemption, and it's broad enough for me to drive a Mack truck through. And so I guess, Mr. Chair, where is this bill going to from here?
It will be re-referred to state government finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess they don't. like I said, I don't like passing legislation that's just about feeling good and not really accomplishing anything, and I don't see this bill, the way it's written with the exemption in it now, accomplishing anything.
Representative Stansted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Krisha, I have a lot of concerns about the specific language in this, and I appreciate the word change from boycott to discrimination, but I think that in the long run is probably going to just end up creating more work for all of us here, and maybe open a can of worms that we need to consider carefully before we get into that. And I'm wondering, in your opinion, could your intent or the nature of what you're trying to do here be accomplished better through a resolution than a policy?
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a bill in front of you. I think this is the best vehicle.
Representative Stansted.
Have you considered a resolution before this bill?
Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative. You have a bill in front of you, and I think this is the best solution.
Thank you.
I have no other member questions at this time, so I will renew my motion that House File 400, as amended, be re-referred to the Committee on State Government Finance. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
The motion carries and the bill is re-referred to State Government Finance.